Action. All right, everybody. So we're really in the final stretch of the election, and we've been in the final stretch for a while now. Now we're really in the final stretch of the election, and things are getting a little real. And one of the biggest recurring themes for the current presidential candidates, well, I guess besides Donald Trump, considering he doesn't really talk about policy outside of his go-to catchphrases, which aren't really policies, they're just kind of sentiments, if anything else. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, in particular, have been being asked quite frequently in interviews and on media appearances what their plans are, particularly for the economy, one of the biggest wedge issues, yeah, I'd say it's a wedge issue, I guess. One of the biggest issues, like highest polling issues this election, and almost every election, to be fair. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden did not get a lot of attention over the last 4 years for their achievements, their unprecedented accomplishments in growing the American economy and helping it to recover from COVID. In fact, the most coverage it got was generally from right-wing outlets accusing accusing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris of doing a planned economy. Everything was going to be communist. We'd be in bread lines, you know. They did that whole thing, and then when we experienced unprecedented economic growth, they said nothing. And then every time the stock market would take a dive for a day or two, you better believe they freaked out about it and talked about how this is Bidenomics. Meanwhile, very little coverage of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's achievements in office when it comes to the economy. And this has meant that over the last few weeks, and now for the next 60 days, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have an uphill battle to fight in this realm of perspective in which people believe that they haven't really done anything for the economy and don't have anything in mind that could possibly fix it. A lot of people who are going to vote for Trump in November, while many are on the Trump train and are sycophants, many more are kind of checked out of politics. They think themselves centrists, and they're just going to vote for him because the economy was better under Trump than it was under Biden. Is that true? Not really, but they think it is, and that's all that matters. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at this interview, or at least a clip from this interview that came out of CNN, where Kamala Harris is questioned on her plans for entering office day one, particularly when it comes to improving the economy. And obviously, we've heard her talk about the whole opportunity economy thing, but what does that mean? Let's hear about it. And then we're going to go ahead and read a breakdown of Kamala's policy that she has already laid out, kind of all gathered together in one place for us to read. I figure it's a pretty useful resource. Anyway, let's check out this interview clip.
If you are elected, what would you do on day one?
Hold on, chat. I forgot to pause the music. All right, music. You gotta take a break. You gotta crash out for a moment. All right, let's watch.
If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
Well, there are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at
So this is going to be a recurring talking point from the Dems all the way up till the election when it comes to the economy. Something that I've noticed is that leftists on the internet in particular really don't like the term middle class. They don't like they just don't like it. Typically, leftists like to break things up between bourgeoisie and proletariat. That is to say, the owning class, the extremely wealthy means of production owning class, and the working class, those who work for the wealthy people that own the means of production. And when it comes to breaking down like workers' rights stuff, I think that's a pretty reasonable perspective. Like, I get why that is a popular way to look at it. But when we're talking about the American economy and when we're talking about an American president, we have to recognize that the majority of Americans do not see things that way. For the majority of Americans, there is lower class, and lower class means for most Americans living below the poverty line, which we looked up a few streams ago. That's $12,000, just a little over $12,000 per year for a single person. Living in a single-person household, that is the poverty line for one person. And it's like $14K for two. It's not much more to be considered in poverty, while being a two-person household making that much. So a lot of Americans, because of our very, very low poverty line, basically consider themselves middle class if they're not homeless. And when politicians talk about the shrinking middle class, what they really mean is people who are on the edge of poverty, perhaps even losing their homes, that happening and them losing their homes and becoming fully homeless or having to couch surf or truly being in a state of financial devastation beyond, well below or at the poverty line, which is itself unlivable. So there are tons of Americans in this country who have basically unlivable incomes. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They have no savings. Literally one medical disaster ends their lives practically because they're going to be in shitloads of medical debt. They don't consider themselves lower class. The vast majority of them don't. They think themselves middle class. They think themselves people who need to advance to a higher position in the middle class. But what terrifies them is that the floor is going to be eaten out from under them as the middle class shrinks, which is this narrative, this scary idea that has been going around for a while. And there is some truth in it, to be fair. And so that is the perspective that the Dems have been taking so hard in trying to prevent that thing that so many Americans fear.
Aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people. I think that people are ready for a new way forward, in a way that generations of Americans have been fueled by hope and by optimism. I think, sadly, in the last decade, we have had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and in an environment that is about diminishing the character and the strength of who we are as Americans.
I imagine that she's kind of put on the spot here with this question. So when it comes to talking about Trump's policy, which I don't know if she should even really be talking about in response to this question, she's kind of redirecting. But if she's going to bring up Trump, I would probably, the first thing that comes to mind for me when it comes to Trump's bad economic policy was the steel tariff thing that he did. That was lauded by conservatives as such a great strong-arm business maneuver, but basically every economist, even ones that supported Trump, correct me if I'm wrong, or were generally like Republican, all agreed that this would just result in raising prices for manufacturing in the U.S., which would trickle down to the consumer level and cause the products themselves to become more expensive to buy. And that was one of Trump's biggest, like, big brain economics moves, right? He was the businessman, right? That was the whole perspective. He was supposed to run this country like it was one of his companies super successfully, and we're going to have a lot of money, people. We're going to have so much money. And didn't happen. Donald Trump is not good at economics. He's not good at running the country financially. He left this country in financial ruin after COVID. That was inherited by Biden. The Republicans very effectively spun that, obviously. But regardless, Kamala and Joe fixed the economy amazingly, at an unprecedented speed, and at an unprecedented challenge, like with unprecedented challenge from all directions. It really does seem like the lack of attention was meant to hurt Biden, if it was meant to hurt anyone, towards like the achievements, but now it is harming Kamala, right? Like, everybody wanted Biden out, and so there was very little attention given to his accomplishments. But the fact that you weren't willing to give Biden any credit for anything means that now Kamala Harris has not received credit for the last 4 years of accomplishments her administration, too, has actually achieved. So it's a bit of an uphill battle, like I mentioned before.
Really dividing our nation, and I think people are ready to turn the page on that.
So what would you do day one?
Day one, it's going to be about, one, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy. I've already laid out a number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life, to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue.
One of the biggest things I really hope we see, and I feel like a Kamala Harris administration might be what gives it to us, is just a massive, massive move to price cap diapers. Any parents in chat know exactly what I mean. Diapers are one of the biggest money drains of parenthood, early parenthood. It's like 3 or 4 years, depending on the child, of like just constant spending. I know parents, you know, and they talk about how much money they spend on fucking diapers. My mom talks about how much money when I was a baby she had to spend on diapers. It was an insane amount of money, and they're quite overpriced. I would like to see, yeah, this would be something the Republicans would fight tooth and nail, of course, you know, the party of family values. But I think we could potentially see that out of a Harris administration. Like some kind of cap on the price of diapers and other baby care products, you know? Diapers are expensive regardless of age, incontinence, or otherwise. Oh, yeah, are adult diapers also expensive? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's a reason why they're as expensive as they are, but I feel there's some sort of highway robbery shit going on that needs to be addressed.
In our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one.
Yeah, so obviously she doesn't break it down too deep there, though that is a good response. I actually wanted to go into this BBC News article that goes deeper into Kamala Harris's set economic goals. So let's read this. New homes and an end to price gouging. Harris sets economic goals. Kamala Harris has called for millions of new-built homes and first-time buyer help, tax breaks for families, and a ban on grocery price gouging, and her first speech focused on economic policy. The Democratic presidential nominee's plans build on ideas from the Biden administration and aim at addressing voter concerns after a surge in prices since 2021. Yeah, so the American economy is very complicated, and even I am not the best person to take this from, so take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt, and if anything I say you know to be wrong, please let me know, because I would like to be corrected. But as far as I'm aware, everything I'm about to say is accurate to how the current inflation and price situation with groceries and food is currently going down. Throughout COVID, we saw massive amounts of inflation, generally just meaning that the US dollar lost value, right? Like, your buying power went down. And this basically manifested for the majority of people as prices going up in grocery stores. Like, all of a sudden, something that was worth $2 is now worth $3 or $5, right? And that can be a pretty big problem. People got hit pretty hard by this during COVID, and on top of that, a lot of people couldn't work. And so all the prices going up and not making any money, it was a very, very bad time. Much of this was through Trump's presidency, but that was just the beginning of the economic crash. It really hit as he left office and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris inherited the economic ruination of COVID and Trump's handling of it, should I specify. And so generally when something like this happens, the economy getting fixed doesn't just make the prices go back to normal. Because those prices didn't go up like buoys rising due to water level. There wasn't necessarily like a direct math done to raise the prices as much exactly as the dollar has lost its value. That's not how this tends to work. The way it works is in times of economic bullshit, companies set the prices. And sometimes they set them locally. If they know people have the money to pay more, they'll charge more. And if they know people don't have as much money, they'll typically charge less because they do still want to get the sales from people who are lower income. The fact is, after times like this, these companies know that they can either shrinkflate, meaning that they can just reduce the amount of a thing that they're giving you but still charge the same amount, or outright inflate the price, and you're not really likely to do anything about it. Like, what are you going to do? At the end of the day, the only thing you can do is not boycotting, it's simply not being able to afford the thing at its set price anymore. Maybe there's some cheaper store brand version, or maybe you just decide not to buy that thing at all. And as more and more people continue to meet that point where they just can't afford to spend that money anymore, these companies will take a hit to their bottom line, and in response, they will adjust the price to increase sales again. And that's how the prices recover if it's not done by some executive order or policy pass that caps prices or adjusts them via the law or some regulation of companies or certain business owners. And so right now, the economy has recovered substantially. Like, if you look at all of our graphs and economic trackers, the stock market, everything, the economy is in a really good place. Bidenomics has worked very well. The problem is these companies in many areas have not yet decided to start dropping their prices to an appropriate level akin to where the economy is at right now. It's already started, though. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but grocery prices have gone down, at least where I am they have. I've certainly noticed it over the last year or two. On top of that, I know that McDonald's made a big deal about lowering their prices recently, and that was like all in the news because everyone was like, holy shit, McDonald's is finally getting cheaper again. And a bunch of other fast food places have followed suit. And I don't think this has anything to do with Bidenomics necessarily, though I don't think it's because of not Bidenomics, to be fair, or Kamalanomics, I guess we'll call it. I think it has a lot more to do with the fact that people are pissed at the prolonged price inflation, and they're buying less fast food. They're buying less of certain things at the grocery store. And these companies are slowly but surely going to have to adjust the prices to something more reasonable simply because people are just not going to buy it. Not because of some motivated boycott, but because they're just not going to be able to buy it anymore. It's not going to be able to fit their budget. Anyway. Many of the proposals would require action from Congress, where similar ideas have stalled in the past. Donald Trump said the vice president had already had more than 3 years with the administration to deliver her promises, which his campaign called dangerously liberal. So Donald Trump's criticism is, you already had enough time to fulfill these promises, but also they're evil and dangerously liberal. Quote, where has she been and why hasn't she done it, he asked. For one, I'm pretty sure the vice president is the president of the Senate, right? Not the leader of Congress. Not to mention, Congress is filled with hard red Republican committees that are very much opposed to anything the Democrats, including the current administration, tries to push forward. Am I mistaken? Like, Donald Trump's take there is a little goofy. I wonder how much Donald Trump knows about how the, how Washington works, you know? Ms. Harris hit back in a speech on Friday in North Carolina stating, I think that if you want to know who someone cares about, look at who they fight for. Donald Trump fights for billionaires and large corporations. True. I will fight to give money back to working and middle-class Americans. The campaign's proposals include a first-ever tax credit for builders of homes sold to first-time buyers, as well as up to $25,000 in down payment assistance for eligible first-time buyers, a move that her campaign estimated could reach 4 million households over 4 years. She has also called for capping the monthly price of the diabetes drug insulin at $35 for everyone, not just seniors, where it's currently capped, thanks to Biden. Finding ways to cancel medical debt and giving families a $6,000 tax credit, child tax credit. Tax credit if they have a new child. I thought they forgot to write child tax credit. She is supporting a federal law banning firms from charging excessive prices on groceries and urged action on a bill in Congress that would bar property owners from using services that coordinate rents. So she is running on policy that would force these companies to set their prices lower, not just wait until people can't afford to spend the amount of money they're wringing out of them and lower their prices accordingly, but to be forced to lower their prices in grocery stores. I like it. Democrats and their allies are hoping Ms. Harris will prove a more forceful and trusted messenger than President Joe Biden on economic pain. Robert Weisman, the co-president of the consumer watchdog Public Citizen, characterized Ms. Harris's plan as a pro-consumer, anti-corporate abuse agenda. The Biden administration did talk about it, but they did not promote proposed measures anywhere near as aggressive as Harris is doing. Kamala Harris is in the current administration. I really love how, the media is even still trying to find ways to shit on Biden while praising Kamala Harris. It's like, trust me, everyone, Kamala Harris's administration will be miles more progressive than Biden's. Biden, you know, he didn't do shit. Trust me, you know, like, because people's perception was that Biden didn't get anything done because he was boring and the media didn't bother to cover his achievements. So for Kamala, who's far less boring than Biden, she has like energy and sort of stage presence in a way Biden didn't. They need to push this idea that she's not just more entertaining and more affable and charismatic as a presidential candidate. She's also, trust me, bros, more progressive than Biden, you know, and it's, maybe she is, but certainly not by the, like, as much as anyone is framing it, you know? It just feels like this post hoc justification for why it was, like, also somehow the most progressive position was to oust Biden in exchange for Kamala. It's like, no, it may have been the best, way to go about it strategically, but Kamala Harris isn't, like, some hyper-progressive figure that's, like, booted Biden out of office, you know? It's, or like, booted him out of his seat. Or taken his place, and we're all like super lucky for that from a policy perspective. It's like they're pretty on par. She might be a little better, but they're pretty on par. And I feel like it's just like copium to try to claim that Biden wasn't better than he was. I don't know. It's weird. But pollster Micah Roberts, a partner at Public Opinion Strategies, said inflation was likely to remain a challenge for Democrats, noting that voters have a long history of trusting Trump and Republicans more on economic issues, like I said before. Trump's been holding the advantage on this stuff for like a year plus, said Mr. Roberts, the Republican half of a bipartisan team that recently conducted a survey on economic issues for CNBC, which found that Trump still held a big lead over Ms. Harris on the topic. Yeah, I wonder why. Maybe it's because you're still trying to claim that the administration she is still currently a part of is bad at economics and isn't progressive enough. Like, maybe get behind the candidate that you are behind also while they're currently in office. Like, I don't, it's so bizarre. Like, yeah, no shit, people associate Trump with a better economy. Like the last 4 years of Kamala's vice presidency has been nothing but ignoring their economic achievements. We're still coping and trying to pretend like that was justified, by the way, in the same BBC article. Obviously the article's not what claims that, but the person who they interviewed claimed that, right? Though analysts say some of Harris's proposals, such as the ban on price gouging, are likely to be popular, they have also sparked criticism from some economists. Bans on price gouging already exist in many states, applied during emergencies such as hurricanes. Yeah, well, we're still in a pandemic, and that should count as an emergency like a hurricane. But economists say the term is difficult to define, and widening such rules could end up backfiring by discouraging firms from making more at times of short supply. I suppose that could be an outcome, but if there is a low supply, then demand just goes up and they increase the supply if necessary. And at that point, they can justify increasing the prices if there's a lower supply. That's not price gouging. That's like what happened with PS5s, where they were like super expensive for a long time and everybody was like lined up outside of the fucking doors to buy them. And Sony was, I guess, in a rush to produce these things. You know what I mean? Like, that's not price gouging, though. That's just actually playing the economy, like, by the rules. But economists say the term is... Michael Salinger, a professor of markets, public policy, and law at Boston University's Questrom School of Business, said a similar ban was discussed when he served as the lead economist at the Federal Trade Commission during the administration of George W. Bush. Quote, "I thought then that it was a bad idea, and I think now that it's a bad idea," he said. "To impose controls on competitive markets will lead to shortages. That's always been our experience." Yes, I'm sure the conservative economists that served under Bush, I'm sure their perspective on economics is fantastic, you know, but Bush-era economics, man, they really served this country well, famously so. For example, the proposal to increase the tax credit for children to as much as $3,600, which Congress did temporarily during the pandemic and opted against extending, would cost more than $1 trillion, according to some estimates. But we can absolutely afford that. Yeah. $1 trillion's a lot of money, but we can absolutely afford that. Like, yeah, we absolutely can. Especially if it's a program like this that's going to save Americans so much money, you can tax the middle class more. Obviously, the ideal thing is we tax billionaires more, and that will happen, I'm sure, but we already have some pretty high tax brackets as it is, though more should be added for, like, your super, super rich people, and there needs to be accommodations for the loophole shit where they store their money and their value in assets rather than liquid cash, so it's not taxable in the same way. I do think that I think that the majority of Americans, and I think that most data suggests this, because I know it's the case when it comes to free healthcare, like a complete, like, all tax paid for, complete free healthcare for every American. It would require that you raise taxes for the middle class as well as the wealthiest Americans. However, while that is true, in the long run, Americans would be saving an immense amount of money that they're currently spending on insurance and out-of-pocket medical fees, because they would just be paying, like, a small amount, everybody into the pot, for better healthcare. You know? So yes, we would have to slightly raise taxes for the middle class to pay for a lot of these programs, but these programs make being an American cheaper, just for everybody across the board. So it ends up paying itself off, really not in the long run. It's pretty quickly that it pays itself off, you know? There are so many, like, in the case of free healthcare, countless Americans, I think like 40% or something like that, maybe a little more, are literally one medical emergency away from full-on bankruptcy, right? You think those people won't be willing to pay, like, maybe 100 or so more a year in taxes if it means that they never have to pay another medical or insurance? The hospital is insane. But in the case of the child tax credit thing, yeah, if you're getting up to $3,600 or $6,000 in child tax credit, you're absolutely going to be fine paying a little extra in taxes, which is how we get a large part of the $1 trillion needed to pay for this program. Plus, not to mention, America already has a shitload of money to work with for these programs already. Like, $1 trillion is a lot, but it's not really that much. Like, the U.S. is rich, dude. With populism ascendant in both parties, that cost has not dissuaded Trump's choice for vice president, J.D. Vance, from backing an even bigger tax credit expansion. Professor Salinger said Trump's other economic plans would be unlikely to tackle inflation concerns. I feel like J.D. Vance is so desperate for people to like him, he just at one point said, you know what? If you guys like Kamala Harris's tax credit, I'm going to do an even bigger one. How do you like me now? I feel like that's what J.D. Vance did, and it just completely flopped. He's just constantly kicking himself in the nuts, and everyone's watching and laughing and pointing. Economists predict that increased drilling would have limited impact given the... Oh, wait, what? Okay. Economists predict that increased drilling would have limited impact given the global nature of energy markets, and have warned that Trump's pledge to impose a tax of 10% or more on imports would drive up prices. I love that. Economists are coming out to say Donald Trump's plan to tax imports on oil so that we're exporting and, like, producing it here more by 10% would just drive up prices here, and it would just hurt the average American. It would just raise gas prices more than they already get risen anytime, like, say, a Democrat is in office by the companies that own the gas. Anyway, as it stands, price increases have been subsiding as the stocks from pandemic-era supply chain issues and the war in Ukraine fade. Inflation, which tracks the pace of price increases, was 2.9% in July, the smallest annual increase since March 2021, the Labor Department said this week. That is getting closer to the 2% pace considered normal, though prices are up roughly 20% since January 2021. Quote, the problem that people object to is that even if inflation is down, the prices are still higher. And that's true, but they're higher because of the natural working of market forces, Professor Salinger said. Quote, trying to stand in the way of the working of market forces is a lot like trying to stop the tides, he added. You just can't do it. I don't know about that, man. I don't know. I don't think it's literally I don't think the economy is a force of nature or literal magic where you can't have any earthly effect on it. I think if the president says you're not allowed to charge any more than this for, like, I don't know, dry food products, they're not going to charge any more than insert that price for dry food products, and the companies are still going to be fine at the end of the day. If they start to suffer, they can get a government bailout like they always do when some bullshit happens. Like, what the fuck? Like, what is this? I know this is a conservative economist that was talking there, but I find that hysterical. Anyway, I feel like that's a pretty good breakdown of what Kamala Harris's plans are, even if a lot of it came from the coping and whining of a conservative, which that's almost the best way to hear it as well, because when conservatives cope and whine about the progressive policies of a Democrat, they sell the policies better than any Democrat could, you know? Like, when I hear a Republican complain about these policies, they're like, oh my God, it's so dangerously liberal. They're going to give money to poor parents. It's like, oh my God, yeah, like, holy shit. I was already sold. You're giving me the hard sell now. Anyway, if you liked this segment or feel you learned anything from it and had any fun with it or enjoyed it at all, please consider leaving a like. It really does mean a lot. I really do appreciate you watching. Every thumbs up that you leave on my stream, my videos, no matter when or where or what you're watching, really helps the channel a ton, so I really do appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And of course, consider subscribing and ringing the bell icon so YouTube tells you when I go live or upload any new videos on my channel. Sometimes, or I should say most of the time, they won't if you don't ring the bell icon. And of course, consider commenting down below. It also helps the channel a ton, so I really do appreciate it. If you're watching this as a video and you comment, it really means a lot. And of course, if you want to see more from me on other platforms, my social medias are linked down below in the description where you can follow me on other places. Don't forget, you should join me on my fan Discord as well. There's a link in the description. It's totally free to join. I host game events, call-in streams, and watch parties there, as well as announcing all my new uploads and streams. So if you don't want to miss anything and you don't want to risk YouTube bugging out and not telling you when I'm active or I upload something, my Discord server is the best place to be for guaranteed alerts. On top of that, if you are feeling so generous and you can afford it and you feel like doing so, consider helping me keep the lights on and a roof above my head by donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or supporting me financially through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, StreamElements, Patreon, or buying merch to the Streamlabs link down below in the description. Regardless though, even if you're just lurking and hanging out and you haven't even said anything, thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot and I really do appreciate it. And as always, have a good one.